It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
It's a Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 57. Can you believe it? Harry is here to chat to us about a dreadful weekend in South African rugby. Not that I want to talk about it. I heard shouts of province in the streets of Pretoria and I wasn't happy. But I suppose you were.
You are a big fan of the post-match press conference. I think you listen to them really well. You're one of the better questioners now in the world of press conferences. And I think that's partly because a lot of the press conference questions are by rote. I've only been in one as a press conference guy in the Bledisloe in Australia, and I kind of made a joke of it. And I had Harry Wilson, the captain of the Wallabies, kind of teed up and made a funny joke. But I was struck for the fact that it seemed like the whole room was more interested in my question because it was different. And then I reflected later, like, all the questions are the same. So the lineouts, how do they seem to slip a little bit, Harry? And then Harry Wilson has to talk about the lineouts, and it's just so boring. And then if you get a little bit frisky, then they get mad at you and they fire back, and you have those incidents. We don't want those because it doesn't really give you much, and you're baiting. I feel like the questions you were giving both coaches, both Jake and Dobbo, they triggered some interesting musings. And, when you catch Jake in a meditational mood, which is probably only going to happen when you lose, it's quite interesting. He was kind of talking through several permutations, I think he called it. If you take the draw, not that was on offer, but if you take the draw, then you get 2 points instead of playing the game. If you do play the game, you have injuries. They really wanted to win. They went for, line out instead of points at some points. And then he sort of mused about why you couldn't shift line ups right before, depending on the weather, like other sports. And then he thought maybe it's because, that gives the home team too much advantage. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't, but he kind of went through that. What did you think about that level of discussion, and why did Dobbo kind of do the same? He stayed forever and just kind of rambled.
Well, I said to you afterwards, you asked me what was Jake's demeanor like, and I said to you, typically when he loses, he's not a nice guy to be around. Obviously, I mean, it's not nice to lose and go sit there and justify it because you haven't even had a time to look at the game. And he wasn't. He was musing, like he just said. What is the word that he used there? That actually quite apt. What did you call it? I can't remember now.
A meditation?
Yeah, but he was like reflective. That was the
Amusing.
word. Yeah, amusing and a different Jake than what I'm used to. And you know what these press conferences are like. You get when the press conference starts, Lunga would say you, and invariably I would be right at the end, and all the questions would have been asked, and I do a mad scramble to come up with something at least.
That's
And
the worst, when everything you got written down has been covered in
yeah, I
some
know.
way.
And then I have to think of something that doesn't make me look like an idiot in Jake's eyes either. So I tend to look a little bit bigger picture rather than the nuts and bolts of the game. Because I'm not the expert that you guys are, you and Andre, for example. I look at like what would have happened, could they have rescheduled, and that's been the whole thing about Jake talking about why can't we change the team right until we run into the field. That was quite nice. The funny thing about Dobbo was that we were all leaving, we were all out the door basically, and in he walks. And we all had to scramble back and put the cameras on and what the hell am I going to ask this guy? And I was the very first guy up, almost, if I remember correctly. No, second guy. And yeah, that was quite an opportunity. And he mentioned Salman Murat's, physicality. And then I saw the opportunity and I asked, because I watched Salman Murat before the game when they were standing in a little circle. He thought I was referring to Kobus van der Merwe's minute of silence. I don't know if you saw that he died. And
Yeah.
and I wasn't referring to that. I was talking about a team talk they were having in a little circle on the field there. And I saw his eyes. He was jacked up. And
Yeah.
you've often said you can't see what Murat, and that to me was an interesting question and answer as well.
I think big guys, there's one problem with big guys, especially if they were big from the time they were 10 or 12, is they didn't have to be that aggro to win the contest. So Salman was a big boy at 10, 12, 14. He wouldn't have had to go full Dion Fourie, to justify his size. Kwacha, who are always playing above their head, they're punching above their weight. And so they bring that extra leg drive. Artie Savea, not a big guy at all. If you stand next to him, you're like, wow, I can't believe you're a number 8 at test level and that good. Whereas other guys like Dwayne Vermeulen, you're like, okay, I mean, I don't want to fight with you, because you look like you'd win every fight. Salman Murad has that look, but then he underpunches. I thought for the first time, there were a lot of first times. There were a lot of things that derbies really bring out the best in you. And one of those is, I felt like Salman said, I'm kind of tired of being that guy. And I feel like he tried to really like leave marks on your guys. And even when he was done with the tackle, getting up a certain way where you use your elbow as leverage and that elbow goes on the top of the other guy's head and you lean and you just do one more little push into the mud. That stuff. That's what we always wanted from him. That's all we wanted. He's a very skilled player, set piece lock, has the Victor Matfield sort of playbook, where he's studying it, trying to be that good. I don't know if he ever will be, but he's got that stuff, where he knows the body angles and the hip at the line out, where to clean, the rules. He's obviously a good captain, personality. But where was the part where you're like, I'll get in trouble for you. I'll fight you because you hurt my guy. In fact, I'm going to do something kind of wrong, I'm just going to grind your face into the mud because I feel like it. That's what I wanted from him. I think every Province supporter was really excited to see him bring that out for once. So that's a category that I want to talk about today. Just the reason why derbies are so special, the reasons why they're so beautiful. Dobbo talked about how chuffed the Bulls must have felt to win in Cape Town, how beautiful they must have felt for that win when they snuck one out there and then, flip it around. Same thing of like, it's so special to go and just beat your enemy on their pitch. It's the stuff of everything. It's what makes all these leagues work. We can talk about, and people did ask Dobbo, should we do the Curry Cup this way? Should we position it that way? What time of the year can we have it? How can we use the schools? In the end, it all rests on derbies. I mean, you can talk about schools all you want, but all that results from the two different socks playing each other. We saw the socks. You put those two socks together in one pitch in Parle, there could be guys next door neighbors, and they are gonna play out of their socks. And it's gonna be the most physical. It's gonna be the dirtiest. It's gonna be the roughest. It's gonna be the toughest. So what I call this North-South derby, I'm not gonna talk about people say this is the greatest this, the greatest that, the Billy Goat that climbs the mountain of this. I'm gonna say it's the hardest derby in the world. It's the hardest derby in the world of any sport. North-South is, it's brutal. The carnage on the field. I mean, both teams came in missing 3 stars. And then within minutes, you guys had lost 3 another. And there were people you couldn't afford to lose because your sky guy, your only guy that really could sky in the air and claim 50-50s, Keenan Moody, was out. And look at that statistic. The rest of the game was 9-1. Both coaches pointed that out. Jake was bemoaning that, and he gave full credit to the Stormers. He said they do that really well. They win matches from what happens on spilled ball. Who's around to get the scraps? You can talk about lucky tries and balls that come off knees and kick forwards and Similani, but that is a design play. But you got to keep doing it. It's like you got to do that 10 times, and then the law of averages will help you. 2 or 3 times, somebody's going to knock on. Sebastian de Klerk on an island knocks it on. There's no one around because they picked the right one. Dobbo pointing out that on the very first play, set a tone. They find Vili alone, isolated, and Vili was isolated all day. In the whole game, he felt like he was the island. So they catch him, they target him on the kickoff, and Roos counter-rucks with his friends, and there's a penalty. It doesn't sound like much, but Dobbo pointed out that the same thing happened against the Stormers before in the previous derby, and it really matters. He's a young man. It hurts you. It makes you think, oh no, our game plan is wrong. And also, if they can do that one time, maybe they can do it again. And dropsies, the minute someone drops a ball in rugby in a rainy day on an awkward kick, it just makes Yuri feel really good. He wants to do that all day, and it makes everyone on the Bulls side, it's infectious. We've all played those games where one of your most reliable hands guys drops the ball, and then the ball's coming in the air, it's yours, and you're like, I wish it wasn't mine. Yeah, I don't want it to be mine. I hope someone else takes it. And so what Jake was talking about there was they knew that was a thing. That was a thing that overwhelmed the scrum dominance. Because in a way, you can kind of contain that. What happens with scrum dominance is, unless you can really take full advantage, which the Bulls never did, you just get a line out that's about 20 to 40 meters farther. No cards developed from the 6 scrum penalties. That could have happened, but they didn't. Maybe they didn't happen enough in a row. Maybe the ref didn't really see it as being infringement so much as overpowered. Whereas when you regain 9 kicks and the Bulls only regained 1, you're behind enemy lines. The defensive lines are not set up like Andre Pretorius' setup, where he shows you what you do on hold fold. There's no hold fold. You've got a guy getting a ball behind the gain line about 20 meters, and there's probably 2 people behind, 2 Bulls that have a defensive posture. That's the scramble defense. That's it. So if someone can catch an offload, or if you can hit, the 9 can hit someone like Evan Roos on the run in the next phase, it's battle stations, it's full DEFCON. And fair play to young playmaker Yuri, who just kind of stuck to his guns. The quality of his up and unders was really good. He controlled the parts of his game where he tries to pretend to be Mani and shakes and bakes like Sasha. He can do it, you know. He's a gifted athlete. He's quick, you know. He looks a little bit ungainly like Sam Prendergast, but he's not. He's actually a little bit put together. A big proper power athlete. It's just that he does better when he first does the fundamentals. And so it was a day for fundamentals. The Stormers stopped being goof troopy, except for Galant, who Dabo, I think in your press conference, talked about, you get 4 seasons in one day, and and you have to take the good with the bad with the good. You know, you can't just say, it's like Willie. I only want to have excellent plays, Willie LaRue. You can only throw passes that are perfect. You know, he's going to have a 5-to-1 ratio. And the problem for you guys on this day was, when you stick a guy like Willie, who's played for so long at 15 and had so much space and time, and then the variety of kicks you can have at 15, the angles, the trajectory, and then you put yourself at 10 in on a wet day with Ben Jason Dixon breathing your air. I mean, literally, you know, sharing the same chewing gum, is you don't have any time. You're going to get hit all the time. And you could see Willie almost wanting to get into a scrap, and he wanted to mix it up. And sure enough, he gets carded. I'll give you one of the weirdest things, and the only question I would have asked at the press conferences that I thought were excellent, that I didn't hear, was, why did the Bulls play better during the yellow card? Because when I look at my little heat map, and I look at the light blue and I look at the dark blue, the best patch you had was from 6-3 to 9-all, 6-3 to 9-6, sorry, where it was shifted around. I mean, it's only a 6-point swing, but it's a 6-point swing while you're down 1 man. And then I look at what you did. There was a maul. There was a scrum penalty. There was a maul. There was a drive. There was a good strike. There was a counter ruck. And then Willie comes back on, and you immediately go back to being trapped in the 22 for a long period of time. And sure enough, it's 9-all, then 12-9. Territory. There was just something lacking in Willie's algorithm at 10 on how to control territory on that day. The day it screamed out for Pollard. I mean, this is not an original thought. A lot of people said that. I'm just saying they're right. That on that day, you had to play in the right quadrants. The other press conference theme that I thought was really interesting was adaptation. So I think this is what I heard correctly. That Dabo said we didn't kick early enough in the first 40. We were guilty of overplaying it. I think the question was something of, why didn't you play more or something? And Dabo turned it around and said, no, I wanted it to play even less. And it made me think. I thought about that a lot. I thought, what if Dabo's been thinking that all season? What if we're looking at sort of not a player revolt, but players not following instructions? Because if Dabo thought that about this match, he had to think it about 1,000 times before in the season, where we are underwater. What are we? Stormers are minus 21 on points differential. Almost all those 21 points came from really ridiculous situations where we played too much rugby. What if it flipped it around? Where would we be sitting now? Like, would we be right next to the Sharks if we just played proper percentage rugby? But I found it very interesting that at Oranges, what happened was the Stormers decided to kick early in the cycle. We're going to go 3 phases, 4 phases. If there's nothing on, if we're starting to lose the ground game, then we kick. We're not going to wait till 7. We're not going to wait until we have, a speculator pass and then it gets run away. In the meantime, Bulls go ahead and score a really good try. And how did they score that try? What is the thing we've been saying all season long? When you're camped down on the 22, up the pace, and one of the ways you up the pace is tap and go, because there's no time to do 1.5 minutes of reset, scuffing. I'm sorry, ref, there's some mud under my shoes. Let's scrum again. Walk to the line out, count the numbers. Try to make a throw where you've got about an 4 out of 5 chance of getting it. A tap and go, you've got about a 99 out of 100 that you're going to tap and go. And you've got guys, even without Elrich there and Marcel, you've got like Akker van der Merwe types. If you give Akker van der Merwe a 10-meter free zone to run, even if he's from the 5 and you guys are camped out, so it's a 5-meter, he's going to get 4 meters. And you're going to get a recycle because the ref's never going to blow that one. So you've got basically exactly what you wanted from the line out with none of the errors.
Yeah, cutting out all the uncertainty, having to compete against it. Something goes wrong, Grobler misses another kick. It makes so much sense.
You miss the throw, or you fumble it on the way down, or you join too quickly, or someone detaches, or your maul gets sucked down into morass and the ref has to make a call 50-50 and he goes, scrum, Stormers. There's so many ways it goes wrong. But a tap and go is pretty foolproof as long as you pick the right personnel to tap and go. I mean, there's some people you go, oh, I don't know, don't do it. But yeah, Akker is a trustworthy guy. Most hookers are skilled enough guys to take the ball, tap it, and get the 3 to 4 meters. They're diving the whole time, right? They're just aiming their head at the boot of the defense. So they're going to wiggle and get there. And then you've got exactly what you've always wanted in rugby, a 1 to 2 meter ruck from the try line. You've already got a penalty, so the referee is already thinking on your side. So all you got to do is execute your ruck resources, and either one of your big heavies is going to flop over, which is what happened, or you're going to be able to phase, and then release out to Willie, and then you've got, the magic. So that was a purple patch, and what was interesting about both coaches, and that's why I like listening to this press conferences this time, was they both were honest about what that moment meant. It felt like to Jake that everything was vindicated. Everything was good. And this is it. And for Davo, it was that sinking feeling of like, oh no, we were going okay, 12-9. I make the adjustment at Oranges, and now we're behind. Now my team thinks I'm an idiot. And so that was a big moment. What was that? What was the actual timing on that? Let's see. Vermaat goes on. You're right at so there's 20. So let's say there's 18 minutes to go, and you guys are up in a game that hasn't looked like there's going to be much tries. 16-12. So a penalty won't do it. It has to be a try. So what's interesting there is Dobbo sticks to his guns. You still kick. You still find the awkward. You don't then go, oh, now we got to play Barbarians ball. You keep kicking. You know there's going to be a spill. You are 7-1 up on regains. You end up getting 9-1 on kick regains. You've got to trust your game plan to keep doing it. It's like slot machines in Vegas. You don't go 3 times and then go up, didn't work. You got to keep pulling the lever. So something happened in the Stormers where they just kept chasing. That works. And Yuri, I wrote down at 73 minutes, Yuri just kept launching high balls anyway. And so they stuck to their guns. It was disciplined. It was one of the few times of this, kind of weird, ridiculous season where the Stormers did that. On the Bulls side, the loss of heavy carriers, not having your tanks to get over the mud, over the trenches, through the hedges, and smash a few trees down, that was just palpable. You just watched it and realized, no, there's nothing there. And there were some weird moments, like Galant doing one of the strangest, most awkward kicks I've ever seen on a rugby pitch to a in full flight Ludwig, with his school socks on, going as top speed. And I thought, oh no, this is gonna be terrible. And it was terrible. It was actually a really, really bad play, because not only did he compound the error of not kicking the proper shape, then he followed that up by stopping in his tracks and putting all of his guys offside. And then that's the 3 points that you feel like, ooh, now we're really going to be in trouble. But Yuri, I think, assumed leadership of the Stormers. It didn't feel like it was 22-year-old Yuri. It didn't feel like it was 23-year-old Yuri. It was Yuri mature. I'm changing his name to mature. He matured, and a 24-year-old guy said, "It's as long as I'm here and the other guys aren't here, it's my team." And then on the Bulls side, Willie was in an argumentative mood, but it wasn't that good argumentation. It was where it felt like the team itself was a little bit not into it. The ref wasn't into it. On the ref, I don't like to say the ref's name because I think our refs are too famous. And I think we have to do two things at once, which is support the overall authority of refs more and more. Don't let the TMO encroach, and don't let refs be used as stooges for World Rugby's programs. On the other hand, I just think that refs have to also have an error rate that we understand, and we need to be clear about, what level that is. And I also think that rugby is a game of what you don't call as opposed to what you do. Otherwise, you're calling everything at every ruck. But he was an interesting ref. And with the Bulls fans that I chat with regularly during the match, they fully owned the fact that on the scrums, he was being very punitive. There were a couple of scrums, and our friend Tank from the Cape pointed some of those out, and you can look at his socials and see some of the strange calls. But if he was really clear, even if it was very, very pro Bulls at the scrum, on breakdowns, it was kind of the other way. He kind of let everything go. And so it was kind of a Ben Jason Dixon day because he's the kind of guy who just goes pell-mell, hair on fire at every ruck. And I feel like the loss of the Bulls' Lucy's, premier Lucy's, especially when Marco goes off, it really hurt, because then there was too much tentativeness at the ruck on a day when the ref was letting everything go at the ruck. And so it was even, and he was doing that to both sides. So you needed someone of the Bulls to talk to each other and say, it's time to get as dirty as we want to be at the ruck. It's a derby ruck. So, you put all that together. I thought it was highly entertaining press conferences. I'm agreeing with you that Jake had a different vibe. And what do you think it meant? What do you think was he looking forward to this next stretch already? Or was he kind of thinking what might have been yesterday?
I think I've had a lot of comments, Philip, 11-minute voice notes from Bulls fans being highly irate. I think what it was, especially the fact that he started saying, but listen, no team's ever ended on top of the log, won the final, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't have to play at home.
True.
I think it was sort of preparing the ground for people to realize that we're probably not going to be playing at Loftus in the semis or whatever. Not going to have home ground advantage. But I think this season that counts in the Bulls' favour. They play well. But do you think when you speak to Jake in these kinds of things, he's under immense pressure. And the thing I always keep hearing, it irritates me, and a lot of people are going to be upset with me now. It irritates me that people say, yeah, but you must understand the Bulls supporters are very demanding. There's a difference between demanding and being realistically demanding. You cannot expect a team to win every single weekend using the same player for 18 rounds in a row, playing the Champions Cup, playing the Challenge Cup, whatever needs to be done. And the moment something goes wrong, you jump on your high horse and demand his head. I don't agree with that. And Jake's always has to be on the defensive, and I can see that. So what Jake was saying here to the Bulls fans is, yeah, I know we lost. I don't have any excuses to make. Let's look forward. Going into a nice 3-week break now, a 2-week break plus a week preparation. We're going to be okay. Just calm down a little bit, And I think he's getting a little bit fed up. And I saw it. You know what I'm talking about. We saw it. Jake is a little bit fed up with all this. negativity, if I want to call it that. There's a difference between, like I said, again, having high expectations and being unrealistic. People say to me, I just don't accept that in a Bulls team. You know what? It's not for you to accept. It's not your job. You're a supporter. You know where I'm going with this, and it's like what really gets to me, and now I'm really going to get roasted, is people think they've got a right to demand things simply because they're a supporter, and now they've got an outlet on social media or whatever, and they can say whatever they want to, without any idea what's really happening, what's really going on behind the scenes in terms of injuries. I mean, look at the Stormers, how many injuries they've had. Look at the Bulls, how many injuries they've had. And it's a part of the reason is that these players are played too, they're overplayed because the pressure is on to win. You have to win, no matter what you do. So you use a sort of an alternative roster of players. No, but you're not playing your best team. How can you win with these people? And then you don't play them. And how can you not play an alternative team? Oh, come on, man. That's what I'm going with this thing with Jake. It's I
Yeah,
think
it's interesting.
yeah.
I thought both of them did that that discussion. Darbo went ahead and said, no disrespect to the Dragons, but if, there's two issues there. And Jake focuses more on squad depth and injury rate issues. Darbo focuses more on how you marshal your forces and how you make storyboard the season. And what he was talking about is, so if we're playing the Dragons and we're playing at home, we probably need to embed into our team, Guy Porter, our fifth lock, gets to play. But how does he play if he hasn't played at all?
Mm.
So then you have the idea of how do you get enough game time in players so that they're match fit, which is a different level because of the restrictions around contact training. You now have practices that a lot of practices don't have any contact in them at all. I mean, this is part of the mandates. And so you don't have full on, snot-nosed tackling going on in practices nowadays. And so it's kind of malpractice to throw Guy Porter in to a role where he has to clean, tackle, carry at Irk level against Leinster or something, or even, let's say Dragons, but there's still test rugby players and Dragons. And the physicality isn't any less. There might be the skill problem, but, you're going up against, proper operators. And so I thought it was interesting because maybe both of them were in a meditational mood, maybe with the derbies going split 1-1 at, the other one's house. It allowed them to be non-triumphalist, not annoying chest-beating winners, and it allowed them not to be down in the dumps losers because both of them had taken each other's scalp in each other's home. And so you got a better press conference. I just found it more fruitful. I found it more interesting. Coaches have to lie at press conferences. We shouldn't, bust their balls for lying at press conferences. They have to. It's part of the game, right? So if a journalist that's got just a kind of a, I don't know, chicken shit face goes, so now looking back on the 3 decisions you made that were wrong, can you now, confess to the world that you're stupid? I mean, of course they're going to get something back at them. And they have to lie because what would happen if they said, actually, there were 3 of the worst decisions I made in my whole coaching career tonight. I actually was the one who caused the loss. And, player X, Joe, was an absolute bum tonight. And, his girlfriend broke up with him yesterday. That's why he's in a bad... I mean, we don't want that kind of truth. We want to, hold the party line. It's corporate speak to some extent. When we do get a press conference, and I'm going to give you some credit here, you're never going to take it, but I feel like some of the questions gave the coaches space in which to talk about it, where it wasn't such an attack on them, but it did open up ground. I mean, I think your questions were pointed enough to Jake where he kind of went, well, okay, that's fair. And he went there. Darbo doesn't need much of an invitation to talk, so
yeah, I noticed. I've never spoken to him before. It was very interesting. It's like, yeah, whoa.
You kind of need to stop him. Like, hey, okay, it's enough. You answered my question 7 times, but I felt like it was interesting, and I think derbies are that way in that these are still your brothers. You fight like hell, and then you're really still happy. It even reflected in commentary where Skalkberger was just hilarious, full of pathos. I mean, he tweaked some guys, David Creel's screwed kick off the foot, and Skulkberger comes off. He kicked it off his bunion. It was great. And even, the solemn thing about Kobus van der Merwe, I thought it was interesting for Skull to just go ahead and say, yeah, we didn't have a very good record when he was our coach, but God, we had fun. So, it's the real man behind the man. And it's the joy of this derby in that you clearly have one side that is known for having more of the vibe and the joel and not, proper farmers, sort of city farmers, latte boys. And then you have your guys up there that are just, known for being these grim, indomitable, tough as nails guys who play with a broken leg. But in reality, we're all still very similar. And the teams, because the derbies end up producing a certain kind of rugby, you actually see how similar everyone is. And maybe the socks even makes it more obvious because you literally have so many people who went to the same schools on opposite sides from each other. There's this, wonderful story. One of the great passages in any book that I've loved so much, one of my favorite authors in the world is Nikos Kazantzakis, who wrote Zober the Greek, Freedom or Death. Very manly writer. He writes about all kinds of things, and he is not politically correct nowadays, but he was writing in the 30s and 40s in war-torn Greece. Ended up being a minister of education in the end, and a lawyer. But when he was like 25, 24, he had finished his law degree, and he was just wandering around in northern Greece near Macedonia, just deciding to walk around the earth and see things and see people before he became a proper grown-up guy. And he was at the end of his money. He was near the border. It was raining like cats and dogs. It was a mountain town. He came to a place where no one was friendly. There were Macedonians who didn't like Greek boys like him from the big city in Athens. And he was wandering around. He had no food. He had no money left. And he saw a bright light at the end of a hallway of a dark, dark house. And he just kind of smelled soup. So he walked towards it, just almost like an animal. And it turned the corner, and there was an old lady, all in black. Even her head was veiled in black. And she had a big pot of soup. It was lentils and lemons. And she motioned to him, sit down, big bowl. He sat down. He ate that soup. He was so happy. She kept filling the bowl 3 times until he went to sleep on the bed right next to it. No words. He woke up in the morning. She was on a cot next, and they finally talked, and she said it was the first time she'd seen a man eat her soup in years because her husband had died. And in that moment, they both cried, and he felt so happy, and he realized happiness is a domestic bird, not an eagle in the mountains where you have to fight so hard to catch it. It's right here. It's soup in the kitchen with a man and a woman watching her man eat. And I think home. I think derbies are about roots. I love the culture around. I love the fact that they're wearing their socks. I love the fact that 2 coaches probably had their most honest press conference, the most revealing interviews, one after a loss, a cruel loss. Not good. And Jake will rue this one. He was positioned to take such a beautiful pole position on the log and have a real shot at a more comfortable run. And then, Dobbo could have been very chest beating and look at me and look what we did. And now we have a big run into the playoffs with 4 home games, Bulls 2, 4 home games waiting. And most of the log has 2 or 3 only home games. But it was, I thought it was interesting. It was, I think for people outside, I saw a lot of Welsh and Irish people who loved the game. They were watching from the outside, sort of a home game between people who know each other really, really well. Really well. Some of these guys were playing together when they were 11, 12, barefoot. And here they were on a day that was just cataclysmically rainy. There were scenes before the match that I hadn't seen in a long time. It reminded me of that Durban match in the World Cup, in the first World Cup win, where the ground was flooded because it used to be difficult to drain the pitch, and there were people sliding around. They were having so much fun evading the security. Security was maybe not having as much fun, but it was great to see everyone take their shot. Some big guy, probably a blindsider, playing for his club, the local club in Pretoria, and he was getting on the field barefoot and then trying to evade all the tacklers, keeping stats. It seemed like the crowd let there be one at a time, so they were really watching to see how well you did. One guy got pole-axed, which was funny, held down, pilfered, and jackled by security, man. Sign him up. But even though it didn't go your way, MVA, and even though a couple of weeks ago it didn't go my way, I think you can probably say that then when the next derby runs around, North-South derby, we're going to be glued to the screen or our seats again. This is the stuff that rugby is built on.
Okay, I want to ask you a direct question. I got tired of this weekend defending Jake. So I chose one comment to make a proper comment on. And he said to me after, okay, Mbia, thank you for countering my rant with cold objective facts. And that led to all the voice notes. So what do you think? I opened a can of worms there. I'm asking you, is there something wrong at the Bulls? Or is this just a symptom of a very long, very tough campaign? I always say, Nas Botha used to say, people must remember this. The Currie Cup's not won in May. Remember those times. The URC is not won in March. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And there's so much that can happen in the meantime. And every week is a sort of a mini final. Of course, we want them to win. Speaking about the Bulls specifically, and I know David Lowe, by the way, asked me to ask you about the Bulls. Because he's not sure if you can be objective. You, that's Harry, about the Bulls. Do you think the Bulls are in trouble, or is this just a symptom of where we are in a specific point of the season with all the injuries and everything else? And then when you answer the Bulls question, answer the same question with the Stormers.
Okay. No, so David, my brother, of course, I'll be objective. I'll be infallibly objective and then mysteriously subjective as well. When you start the season and you say, where do I want to be in round 12? Like, where should I position? And I'm Jake, and I'm the board of the Bulls, and I'm talking about, signing Andre Pollard for next season. I'm thinking about, what I do with this or that. I mean, you're in good shape. You're in third place on the log. But what you have to play next is Leinster, Zebra, Munster, Glasgow,
Yes.
Cardiff, and then you have an easy bunny, Dragons. The home games are against Leinster, Zebra, Cardiff, and Dragons. So, yeah, you have a decent amount of home games to run. You've got your injuries are backloaded instead of front-loaded, in that your injuries seem to sort of accumulate. And they accumulated, I think, in an awkward part if you're playing Bulls DNA and you don't have Pollard yet. So you have a problem of two camps of injuries, or two holes. One is the hole at playmaker 10, and the other one is in heavy carrier and stopper, game breaker type forward play. David's own son, but also Marcel he has a lot of injury problems. And you just using Jake's own theory of 2.5 injuries per week. Some will be tiny, some will be big. So I think when Jake did that whole section on the press conference, he messed up because he assumed that you get 2.5 injuries and they stay injured. What you have to do is apply some sort of factor there, which some things are just 2 weeks, some things are 1 week, whatever, 10 weeks. But you can play that out, and for sure by the end of the season, you're going to be, 7 to 8 players down from when you started the season. So that's fair. So the problem with, if you've built your score on a log front, but your injuries are backloaded and they are occurring in a position you actually depend on, which is heavy carriers breaking down defenses, that's how you splinter and score, because you don't have a playmaker either at, Antoine Dupont type 9 or Finn Russell type 10 or Villy at age 28, from the back. You don't have those things running for you. Then what I'll tell David and all the Bull supporters is, don't expect the knockouts to go differently. Expect that the knockouts will also be a problem, even though you're for sure going to qualify and you're going to get into the playoffs. You might be slipping from 3 down during this next passage into the playoffs kind of at 4 or 5. You don't get to go home all the way to the end. And the same things that are afflicting you right now in red zone are likely to occur, but worse if you don't have the big carrier stoppers able to repel the 22 when they come into your 22, which so far has been really good because when Elrich tackles you, you stay tackled. And now who is that guy? And Marcel's, going to have a little bit of weakness. Marco doesn't look like he's properly healthy, hasn't looked like he's properly healthy all season. That's the issue. If you look at Stormers on the other side, at peak, 15 guys properly out, who would have been a whole other team. That's a tremendous depth. Playmakers, you have Sasha, you have Mani, and you have Damien. There are three critical decision makers, and so you've got crazy Galant and you've got young Yuri. Looks like that may be a little bit getting better, that Yuri's stepping up and maturing, and Galant is I think the ratio between great to terrible is changing a little bit in recent weeks, it feels like. There's still some plays where you just bury your head. So the Stormers are getting those guys back, like for sure. During the stretch, we're going to get back some of those key playmakers who open games. The best carrier stats in the whole ERC for 3 seasons now, Willemse. When Willemse has the ball in his hands, he breaks tackles, he makes breaks, he creates try assists, and he creates space for other people. So everyone looks better. Even a guy maybe as limited as Ruan now looks better when he has Damien on the inside of him because he creates that hesitation pass. He can put guys like Suleiman and Zas free, Willemse can. Sasha, we know what Sasha can do. I mean, just as a one-person guy, even if it's just making a kick from 55 meters, but also the variety of kicks he can put into. And then Lubbock at club level is still just one of those guys who can take over a game. He has searing pace from 10, so you can give him a little gap and he himself can go. So I think that's the good story for Dabo. The bad story for Dabo is we're not really a good team. I mean, we're just not. If you're leaking 6 Scrum penalties, and even if you say 2 of them were kind of, crooked, that's still too many. The Stormers have been built on Scrum dominance now for 12 years. And so you've got to fix the Scrum. I love Ali, but Ali's not really a guy who can be a bulwark in a Scrum. And he doesn't even attack as loose head. So, if he's getting pushed aside as a loose head, it leaves his tight head nowhere to go. Tight heads can only be good as long as their loose head is getting ascendancy. So for the Stormers, we're looking at 4 home games as well. But in this case, it is 2 away and then a great stretch at home. Cardiff, Benetton, Dragons. Connacht, Benetton, Dragons, Cardiff. And so there is a good chance that you can max points 4 games in a row at home. Just get through the next 2, which involves Ulster. Scarlets and Ulster, if you could just bank a couple of points, if you just get out of those 2 games, just get 4 points total, so 2 each. It's a very tasty run. Dabo basically said that there's no way to get home playoffs, but he sounded extremely optimistic, calmly optimistic that we're going to be playing playoffs in a decent position, like not in 8th.
Yeah.
So you don't go to Aviva.
Yeah, he said, you don't want to be in 8th because then you have to go to Leinster, and that's the end of your season. Yeah.
One of the mystery teams in this whole thing, we haven't said their names yet, is the spiritually deficient Sharks, which is that they have all the manufacturing facility, they have the assembly line, they have the materiel, they have the perfect factory floor. Everyone's got nice uniforms.
Good capital.
You look at it and you say, that's an interesting list. They should win every single match. And then they don't. And sometimes they don't show up. And so that's the point. Every game between the Bulls and Stormers, you could play this thing 20 times. It would come down to 3 points and lots of guys lying wounded at the end. Everyone gives everything. You cannot fault the effort of the Bulls. They are a tough beat. And Jake said the same thing about the Stormers. He said they're just a tough team to beat. It doesn't really matter, what the score is at halftime or at 60 minutes. They'll be there at the end. You don't always know that with the Sharks. The Sharks look like, to me, a team that's very dependent on being a front runner and having a good score. They don't seem to be a team right now that can dig in on a bad day when things aren't going right. And so that just plays into the hands of a spiritually healthy team like the Lions. The Lions don't have the perfect play sheet. They don't have the team where you look down and you say, oof, look at those guys. Half the time you have to read who they are and say, wait, is that this guy or that guy? When you go into their second string, it's not household names. And they are properly animated. They're a fun team to watch when they are on song. And so, I don't know what to do with the Sharks. There they sit in the top 4. They also have an amazing finishing run. I think they have the best one, which is they have 5 home games. So the Sharks have a proper run. What we can say is that all 4 South African teams should make the final 8.
I think the big question for me is Leinster, are they going to send a proper team or a second string team like they did 2 years ago? And my feeling is they're not, because it's right after the end of the Six Nations. They're way on top of the league. They can afford to give away a game or two, give a couple of guys a rest, give a couple of guys a run. So they're going to play the Bulls first at Loftus, and the week after they're going to play the Sharks in Kings Park. So that's the one big game for both of those teams. The Sharks have got an easy run. Then they've got Zebra, Edinburgh, Ulster, not great. Osprey, Scarlets, easy. The Bulls have got a problem with Munster, might be a bit of a difficult challenge away. And then, of course, the big grudge match. Remember last year in the same press conference after the URC final when Jake said, I'm going to Glasgow and I've got a score to settle. Remember that? There's a lot riding on that game.
Yeah, no, I don't like the Bulls home run, given the feeling, the injuries, the type of injuries, like who they are too. And then you asked me something, is there something wrong? And I don't think I answered it. There are the telltale signs of pressure. There are the telltale signs of a very powerful board. Yes, a demanding fan base, but it's correlated to the degree of success and history of success. So show me a club where they're used to winning and they have a long pedigree of it. They're always going to be like that. I mean, take over at Liverpool and start losing. See what happens. You don't have a long leash. All Blacks, same thing. I mean, it's just the truism of sport, that you don't get to go long. The Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL had such a great run, and then they come short and just get a hiding in a Super Bowl. I mean, the recriminations, the soul searching, maybe we got the wrong guy. They're ready to sacrifice the goat, eat him for dinner. Because he's the baby goat now instead of the big goat. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have such a rabid fan base as the Bulls are. That's just full, that's Praetorian. That's we want what we want. Drive to excellence, whether you're talking about, the proper braai or the golf course down the road from you. So everything's got to be just so, So Jake knew that when he took the job. I don't think you come into that job and think, you tell your friends, hey, I'm taking the job at the Bulls. Okay, you better win. It's the same thing at Stormers. Sure. So I think that's one part of it. But Jake himself, I think, has shown some of those pressure points throughout the season, whether it's calling people up indirectly, pinging them on negative comments, bringing up in press conferences, sarcastic things like, well, you guys get everything wrong and you never say this about us, but you say this about that. It's childish. And it doesn't matter. It's not going to animate you. There's a way to use that, as Rossi does, us against the world in practice and behind the scenes. But I don't think you do it inside the press conferences a la Eddie Jones, because I think then it backfires on you. Even players want to be the David against the Goliath, but they want to be the good guy David. They want to be part of the, the true blue noble fighters to the end. They don't want to be the grumpy, belligerent ones, unless they're already winning. That's fine. So I think that's the problem is Jake's trying to get over the hump. He's seen the pinnacle. He's been to the tip of Everest. It was right there. He took his team all the way through the Himalayas, and then Glasgow happened. So until he gets over that hump, I think it's maybe more a Bulls vibe to be quieter about some of that stuff and more clinical about the rugby part. And that is respected. I think in the Highveld, you just want to see that someone's made a plan and that there's a winch and there's a harness and there's a chain and there's some blocks and there's a way to get the cow out the river. So I think that's where he needs to be more. Exactly. I think Jake needs to be more on that. And I liked that in the press conference when he reflected on the fact that you didn't kick enough. I like that. That told me that he would bring that to bear in the next rainy game. Because I don't know, there were parts of that rainy game where I thought that the Stormers were the only ones that knew that it was raining. And for some reason, the Bulls were like, oh, it's fine out here. It's great. We're gonna throw some offloads. It's gonna be wonderful. And what are you doing? There were so many times where all the Bulls needed was one more recycle and a kick over the top. One of the journos pointed out in the press conference, I don't know which one it was, saying, but there was space at the Stormers' backfield. And if you look at it back, you will see he was exactly right. There was coffin corners all the time. It's very difficult in the rain for the 15 to cover. And Warwick Gelant was so active on the gain line that it was very difficult for his wings to know what he was going to do and track back. And so there were numerous times where there was just hectares of space back there that, you needed 6, 7, 8 more kicks.
Yeah, you needed Chris Smith on fly off. Johan Jordan would be adamant about.
Johan Jordan has become the greatest Chris Smith backer in the world.
Yes, he's definitely family or something.
I love it. Now, listen, I think Chris was an operator, and I think he is that type of fly off. And, this gets back into DNA. What is the best type of Bulls rugby to play if you're the Bulls? And I kind of think that there was a microcosm yesterday, even with all the injuries and all the alibis, excuses. And to be fair, Jake didn't make any excuses. No. He didn't. That's what I liked about him. He was the no excuse Jake. That was still a way, because for the 10 minutes that Willie was yellow carded, the Bulls played really good rain rugby. So I don't really understand it, actually.
You mentioned kicking. We should have kicked more, the Bulls now. And the counterpart of that is the fact that we have to be able to get those balls back. And losing 9-1, like you said, what's gone wrong with our kicking retrieval? Even Kane Moody, he got injured going for a ball, was tackled without the ball, which I think was a bit derby-like, if you want to call it that. What's wrong with our ball aerial skills suddenly? We were quite good at it. Look at the Lions, how well we did with the aerial, tries we scored from aerial contests and the like. Now suddenly we can't catch the ball for our lives.
No, I would say Stormers are elite at that. There's not very many statistical traits that the Stormers are really, really good at this
but
year.
We suffered against the Sharks as well, remember? Same story.
But I do think when you're up against elite kick chase teams, and I think South African teams are the best kick chasers when they're good, the Bulls have just been average. They've just been an average kick chase team. I don't think it's always down to the chasers, by the way, even though I think Kane Moody is suffering from a lack of confidence this season and has looked off his game and off his pace. In contrast, Zas thinks every ball in the air is his. He just has that. I don't care what happened last time. This one's mine. Hartenberg all season been the same kind. Ben Loader is sneaky good. I think, they're talking about him coming back to England and being in the mix for the English squad. Those are some proper operators in the air. Galant's got that kind of big tush, so if he's in the air, he's going to bum you out of the way. So if you can get into the contest area and the ref thinks it was proper contest, he's going to let you body, because then it's just man on man, shoulder to shoulder in the air. A lot of that is just, I don't know if it's wanting the ball more. It's just, the battles. There was a great stat that used to be on the South African stats site that I loved. There was a little app and it went defunct, but it was battles. It was loose balls collected. It was a great stat. it was one of my go-to stats at the end of every match. When I'd watch the match, I go, how did that go? And then I look and I go, yep, there it is, 13-6 or 23-5. And so look at aerial balls as the same as a ball squirreling around on the ground. Is Dion Ferry going to get it? Or is, Ruan Nortia, two, guys who always go for the loose ball and they get hurt too. I felt like all day long, there was just that extra, I'm going to get that ball. I want that ball. I will do whatever it takes. I will slide on the mud. I will get my face in the way of a boot. And so there's been a bit of that to me in the Bulls all season of proper rugby, great. Stats from 22 to 22, great. Everything going correctly, great. The best, top 3, top 2. Now, let's get squirrely, chaotic, and weird. Let's have the ball go the wrong way. Let's have things bounce the wrong way. Bulls are just average. And flip that around. Stormers, when the proper rugby, terrible. Scrum percent, there. Line out, terrible. Now, let the ball just go crazy and jump around, and let's have throw the frisbee on the beach and see which little boy gets it. Stormers get it. So that's what Jake was talking about, is they building their way around that. So I don't think he was surprised by 9-1. Without the stats in front of him, I think he said something like 10. He had it almost exactly right. He was watching the game correctly, Jake. And he was dying inside because he couldn't develop the kick chase is intricate, to your question. You've got to actually have a lot of communication set up, and at Bach level, you see this where you have 3 chasers. You have Eben or Peter Steph going right to the ball now. They don't even waste it on a wing. You have the wing going beyond the ball. So Leckerbeck is waiting like a little terrier spaniel for the loose ball. Kurtley Aronsa, quarterfinal against France, skips away and scores. But it's set up by Eben or Peter Steph contesting in the aerials. Send a big guy who, even if he doesn't jump, is going to have a hand on the ball.
That's good.
And then you have a jackal deck player in the foreground, the Sia, the Dion Ferry. So if you set your kick chase up every time, it's like a set piece. It's not a hit and hope. It's not a maybe. It's not boo, the crowd boos, oh, why'd you do that kick? It's actually really interesting if you watch it and you're watching for the 3 or the 2-man chase. And the Bulls have not been doing that. They've been hitting and hoping. The quality of the kick hasn't been landing in an awkward zone enough. On Saturday, they needed to actually kick even longer. And maybe if the contestables weren't going to be won on that day, they could have played more like the French, just ultra territory. Just go as long as you can, because Khalan's going to make a lot of mistakes, even with lots of time. He's going to run back a few he shouldn't. He's going to try and offload from one knee, and then you're going to intercept it and run.
Last question I wanted to ask you. The Bulls have now played 5 derbies in 6 weeks, 4 of which were in a row. The Lions are going to play 4 derbies in a row and the likes. Isn't it a question of too much of a good thing not being too much? Doesn't it dilute or take away? I know wasn't really planned this way. It worked out this way because of that first round that we had to postpone because of the Curry Cup and all that. Still poor planning, if you ask me. But you should protect the derbies, make them more special, more like rare jewels. It's a derby, and then everybody can get hyped up. Because I saw this week how much less buzz there was than there was last year this time for the same game. I live close to Loftus, and I tell you, it wasn't even remotely the same. And I think it was simply because there was too much of it. Week after week after week, it's another derby. It's almost like a Curry Cup at the end of the day. That dilutes it, don't you think?
Well, you're going to hate my answer, but I don't know. I don't know, because I think that if I put on the column of for and against, I look at top 14, which has such a long season, and they make the most money. They're the most self-sustaining. They have wonderful crowd attendance. I look at Super Rugby, which is way too short and has sparse attendance, but every time they have good attendance, it's about derbies. I look at the ERC, which is in the middle. It's rising. It's a little bit too long, probably. I think there's too many home and aways. Rugby was talking about this over the weekend in a question that was put to both of us by somebody. And he was saying, he understands the sort of shield that they're trying to build, the sort of conference, Dobson called it. And I think that's what you're referring to right now, is inside the ERC, they're trying to build enough of a Shield Conference energy, so the Welsh, who maybe not winning anything, lately, they're still interested because they still want to have the pride of being the Wales top dog. I can see why they did it. So this is my bailout answer. I can see why they thought that it was good to have a lot of North-South derbies because, I get excited about them. But there were a lot of Stormers fans there. I'll say that to you, is that unless the TV producers were lying, they were able to find significant pockets. I don't know. I don't know, but it strikes me that as long as you have the best playing the best in a derby, you're going to have a full house. When you have so many guys missing because of so many injuries, maybe you're making a rod for your own back. So maybe this is the meta issue, the one that governs all other issues, is what Jake is saying. Or I don't know, maybe it was Dobbo. At some point, that sounded the same. Was, we're not supposed to have 12-month rugby. We're not supposed to have 24-hour rugby. You've got to have reloading, proper off-season, and so maybe we're seeing the problem there.
On the subject of the Shield, the Bulls have now lost the Shield. They can't win it anymore. It's either going to be the Stormers or the Sharks. So the Sharks beat the Lions this weekend, it's going to be the Sharks. And if they lose against the Lions again, it's going to be the Stormers winning the Shield. Can you believe it?
Shield's ours. Don't worry about it. We'll take the Shield. But you're going to be positioned very well for the playoffs. And I think the one thing you want to say as a coach, when you talk to your players, injuries notwithstanding, Jay can go into his players right now and say, we are in the best position in this competition of the South African teams. Maybe no one can touch Leinster this year. Maybe that's just the way it is. But, we have put ourselves in the position. And so let's go, guys. I think the break really happens perfectly for you. I mean, I just think this is, if there was ever going to be a time to just, I don't know, take a few days and talk about nothing, like no rugby. Just forget rugby for a while.
On that subject, I want to just tell people I bumped into Elrich Lowe this morning at Loftus Park. Looks good. He's on crutches, but he's upbeat. He doesn't look like someone who's had a serious injury. His mind looks good. His body looks good. All good news. So not this year, I don't think, but he's going to be back next year probably. The
surgery went well, like technically.
Yeah.
So there's two problems to this. One is the rehab, which is still out there. There's always a problem of infections. There's a problem of your mind going crazy. But that first part can really go wrong too, which is the surgery itself can be unsuccessful. We've got so many examples of that in rugby. The good news is it was really well done. So, the doctor was able to see the things they thought they were going to see, and Elrich is through that. I just think it's, if you live a life where you play and you're active and you're outside and you're having fun with your team doing it, it's a weird change. So this is where team will become super important, that people rally around him. And I think the team is not just the players. I think it's the fan base to make sure you rally around. You can look at people like, I'll give you an example. Malcolm Marx had such a bad injury. And there are a lot of teams and cultures in which he would not have come back from that. And yet here he is now, and he's captaining his side in Japan. He's well suited, to go the next mile with the Boks. I think the team rallied around him, and they did so well. So here's hoping for Elrich and people like Elrich. We shouldn't, only talk about him. There's so many guys with really catastrophic injuries in a sport that is, it's no matter how much we try to make it safer on the head, which I support. There's other parts of your body as well that just get blown to smithereens in rugby. Evan Roos, I just want to point out, some people said that he was illegal in the final play, which actually secured the win. Maybe not, but that's part of rugby. That's the rock, that's the breakdown. He had to survive so many cleaning attempts, and he did it in a different way. I don't know, did you see that? He didn't stand up and do any showboating.
Dobson commented on it.
All game long, he was getting involved. And Dobson pointed out that because he was such a marked man from prior seasons where he had all that space, and now he doesn't because he's a person of focus, And so now teams go, must stop Roos. So they put 2 guys on him and they man mark him. He got involved in all the other things that Ricey's been saying for seasons. Like, hey, I love you, Evan, but you've got to work on this, this, and this. He was ticking those boxes.
Yeah, and no aggression, unnecessary aggression, getting involved in fights or punch-ups or anything like that. Just did his job, did it properly. That was a good thing. Good to see, especially now with Elrich and the likes injured, and even Anakom not in the best of form. Probably a good candidate for 8. I wanted to just say on the subject of injuries, I had an interview with Ronaldo Botma, previous former Puma, Sharks, Bulls player, Harlequins in England, and also captain of Namibia. He played in the World Cup for Namibia as well, and he got injured in the croc roll, which ended his career. And to this day, his left foot is still paralyzed. Very, very interesting conversation. But that didn't stop him. So watch out for that. We'll be publishing it soon. And then I also spoke to Sim Gabanisa, my friend from News 24, who broke the news about Andre Pollard. So that was an interesting discussion. I'm going to publish it on Tuesday. Thanks, Harry. That was interesting.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.